Man, it's a sad fact how the DCEU did the DC brand absolutely no favors. It's frustrating because we could have had it all. Warner Brothers had all the cards at their disposal and they just fumbled the bag entirely. There are so many other directions they could have went in attempting to create an interconnected theatrical DC universe, housing some of the most popular characters in fiction, and had the potential to offer some uniqueness in the superhero genre. But no, they were so desperate in trying to play catch up with Marvel, they ran before they even learned how to crawl, tripped, then fell flat on their face and never recovered. No wonder the general audience prefers Marvel over DC nowadays. Could you imagine saying you were even remotely a DC fan during the peak of Infinity War and Endgame hype? Folk would look at you like you were an unwelcomed foreigner or something. When taking into account all the 17 projects in the DCEU, they've sadly had more misses than hits, with more than half of these movies either not doing well critically, financially, or both. Sure, there were some hits at first, with Batman vs Superman and the first ever Wonder Woman solo movie making over $800 million worldwide, but after that, it was clear audiences were catching on to the slop that was being produced because somehow the first ever Justice League movie in this universe underperformed and was just a horrendous film entirely. To everyone's surprise, the only entry in this universe to even scratch $1 billion was Aquaman, but since its release, not a single DCEU entry has come close to earning even half of that at the worldwide box office. The box office results alone didn't necessarily reflect the sentiment that DC could never be successful, but rather that general audiences were rightfully disinterested because the quality wasn't up to par and the heavy hitters of the DC universe weren't being properly utilized. I think a major problem with the DCEU's run is how much they would focus on lesser known characters when they never properly laid the foundation for characters like Batman and Superman. It was an absolute mess of things with Henry Cavill, as evidenced by Superman's absence from the universe for 5 years straight, delegated to headless cameos, shadow silhouettes, or name drops. Oh wow, Bloodsport from The Suicide Squad somehow put Superman in the ICU with the kryptonite bullet off screen at some point. Then there was that whole mess with Ben Affleck leaving, which had his solo Batman movie morph into the Matt Reeves universe, which is completely separate, and the character was absent from the DCEU for about 6 years. In theory, making movies on Shazam, The Suicide Squad, and Harley Quinn are fine, but you're not giving general audiences much reason to care when half of the movies you've been releasing have been dog water, while you're somehow struggling to make a simple Man of Steel sequel. If we're gonna make a comparison to Marvel Studios, Guardians of the Galaxy wouldn't have been as successful if the Avengers movie wasn't a hit, and if audiences weren't vibing with those movies already. By that point, they'd already built up massive trust amongst their core audience, so that allowed them to check out a movie about a team they weren't familiar with. Also, it was just a well-made movie. With all the flops the DCEU has had over the years, it's very ironic how the two biggest flops in the entire catalog were the ones with the most extensive marketing pushes and highest confidence from WB. The first that I want to get into being Black Adam.
Now what you're going to see here is why the hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
The marketing campaign for Black Adam is a very interesting case study because you gotta give credit where credit is due. The Rock knows a thing or two about marketing. The amount of brands or products this man owns and promotes so casually is like he's fluent in another language. Dude could be promoting Black Adam at an NFL game while simultaneously enticing you to try the latest Zoa energy drink. What makes this movie such an oddball development wise is how long The Rock had been in talks to play Black Adam. Apparently he'd been wanting to play the character since 2007. Honestly can't recall many, if at all, any other DC movies that had this strong of a marketing campaign behind it. I'm talking NFL promos. They had a whole Black Adam skin pack in Fortnite. Be sure you don't miss out on the Black Adam experience on Roblox. Ooh boy, I know that must have been a doozy. The Rock even went out of his way to get all dressed up in full costume during San Diego Comic-Con the same year that movie was supposed to release. Couple of other random collaborations here and there, like why was this man promoting men's World Cup matches?
It's time for India versus Pakistan.
Black Adam was added to the roster of multiverses before Green Lantern, The Flash, or even Shazam. There's only 6 playable DC characters in that game. The demand for corporate synergy even seeped its way into the main comic titles, with Black Adam sharing his power with all the DC heroes at the end of Dark Crisis. For some reason, they even drew Teth Adam to look more like Dwayne Johnson for a comic panel. I'm crying, bro. I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that they had a little too much dip on the chip with the character of Black Adam. He wasn't even that popular of a character to begin with. He ain't one of the big boys. What's crazy is that even with all this heavy marketing push, I guess they knew it wasn't enough because The Rock on press tour interviews would just start spoiling the movie, particularly the Henry Cavill Superman cameo. He was doing this the week the movie was supposed to drop in theaters.
I grew up a DC boy. Superman, I love Superman. I loved Superman and I still do, clearly. But here's what I do know. Listening to the fans when I was wrestling always led and guided me, just like now. So for the past 10 years, as I was pushing Black Adam up this hill to get made, for the past 5, 6, 7 years, I was also listening to the fans. The most powerful and unstoppable force in the entire universe has been on the sidelines for too long. So myself, Seven Bucks, Danny Garcia, Hiram Garcia, we fought and we weren't going to take no for an answer. We were going to deliver it to the fans, and then at the end, welcome home.
Well, I hope they thought it was worth it, because the film ended up grossing a whopping $393.5 million worldwide. Like, damn, bro, it didn't even break even.
Allow me. Okay, thanks. Let me see. That's not good. I'm going to run.
Me too.
Okay.
3,
1,
2,
3.
Generally speaking, a movie making that much isn't awful or anything, but a big problem, not just with superhero movies, but with modern blockbusters in general, is how much money these studios are pouring into these productions. I'm sure Justice League is one of the most expensive superhero films due to the extensive reshoots that happened once Zack Snyder left the project.
Which just finished reshooting its reshoots, making it the most expensive TV show ever. So it's gotta be good, am I right?
Honestly, you can't even blame it on poor marketing. I guess people just weren't as interested. There's also the fact that the Black Adam movie is the peak definition of mid. I know people like to say something is mid when referring to something that's actually bad, but Black Adam is the most middle of the road meh DC movie I've ever seen. The costumes were sexy for pretty much every character. The fight scenes were pretty cool, especially any scenes with Dr. Fate, but the plot is generic superhero nonsense. It feels like this movie was made in 2007 with modern technology. I understand The Rock wanting to deliver for the fans, incorporating the biggest character that had been heavily underutilized during that time in the DCEU, but putting Henry Cavill's Superman in the post-credits was a genuine mistake. I mostly blame Warner Brothers for allowing him to pop up, even though internally they had other plans. It gets messy when delving into the legality of things, since it was clear Henry Cavill officially returning as Superman wasn't a concrete plan, as A, WB didn't make him sign a new contract for a multi-year deal for him to return to future projects, and B, James Gunn and Peter Safran had been in talks with Warner Brothers Discovery in co-leading DC Studios because Warner Brothers had spent months hunting for someone to oversee the DCU after Walter Hamada stepped down as head of DC Films. James Gunn was also writing the script for his Superman movie before they shot Cavill's cameo scene, and this was initially pitched to him as an Elseworlds project like Matt Reeves' The Batman, so they had no actual intention in bringing Henry Cavill back, which justifiably led to outrage because you single-handedly blueballed the entire fandom. If you had other plans for Superman, then why let The Rock use Cavill in his movie? Better yet, why the hell did y'all allow Henry Cavill to make an Instagram post saying he was coming back just for him to release a statement that he actually wasn't once Gunn and Safran took over? Those Warner Brothers executives are some hoes, I swear.
You guys make me sick to my stomach, fam.
This is probably going to sound more malicious than intended, as there's no proper way to put this without sounding like I wanted Black Adam to fail, which I didn't. I hoped the movie would be good, but a part of me is kind of glad Black Adam wasn't this huge billion-dollar blockbuster or something, because The Rock having creative control of DC sounds like a nightmare. I've got nothing against The Rock, but he would have turned the DCEU into a really expensive WWE WrestleMania event. The first red flag was how much he prioritized interacting with Superman over Shazam. You know, his literal main arch nemesis slash rival. What do you mean you're making a Black Adam movie followed by a Shazam sequel without either character having crossed paths? Sure, you could say that the intent was to have a Superman and Shazam versus Black Adam movie, similar to that one dope DC animated showcase, but The Rock's sole motivation would be to fight Superman with how much he's been gassing up his character. This man wanted to interact with Superman so badly, he had Black Adam randomly show up in the post-credit scene in the League of Super Pets animated movie. What are we doing here, man? In an ideal scenario, the Black Adam post-credit scene would have led to the Shazam sequel where the Shazam family actually fights Black Adam. similar to the New 52 comics. The Rock's detrimental creative control can be seen in Shazam: Fury of the Gods, because apparently members of the Justice Society from Black Adam, like Hawkman, were originally set to appear, featuring them trying to recruit Shazam into the JSA. The Shazam actor Zachary Levi confirmed on Instagram that The Rock prohibited the JSA characters from appearing at the end of Fury of the Gods, so they went with Harcourt and John Economos from the Peacemaker show instead in the final product. I just don't see how someone like Dwayne Johnson would have been well suited for a leadership role at DC Films. I don't think many of the comic characters would have been done justice, many aspects of the source material would have been left unexplored, and the DCEU would have just manifested into the Rock cinematic universe. Things only got worse from there, as Black Adam was not the last major flop of the DCEU, but in fact would be surpassed by a movie I've seen Warner Brothers glaze like no other. We all of course know that the movie in question is The Flash.
You are?
Yeah. I'm Batman.
Similar to Black Adam, the Flash movie was in development limbo for a long time, but probably even worse as it went through several different writers and directors over the years since its announcement. The general plot of the film had changed drastically, initially just being a simple Barry Allen solo movie, then over time it morphed into being this giant event film by adapting the iconic Flashpoint story. Warner Brothers were way in over their heads with what they thought they could do to generate as much hype for this movie. Instead of following the Flashpoint comics with Thomas Wayne as Batman, they brought back Michael Keaton from the Tim Burton movies. When reading about the initial plans under the leadership of Walter Hamada, it seemed like they wanted to use the Flash as a way of spearheading a bunch of other projects and sort of soft rebooting the DCEU. The events of the Batgirl movie were intended to follow directly after The Flash, featuring J.K. Simmons as Jim Gordon from Justice League. However, instead of Ben Affleck as Batman, it would have been Michael Keaton. It seems as if Keaton would have replaced him as the mainline Batman. Sasha Calle as Supergirl from The Flash would have also gotten her own solo movie, and according to rumors from a couple years ago, Batgirl, Supergirl, and Wonder Woman would have essentially been the new Trinity for DC, with Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck nowhere in sight. Due to the changes in leadership at Warner Brothers following its merger with Discovery, The Flash had multiple alternate endings, each suggesting different potential futures for the DCEU. We know there was one where Michael Keaton was supposed to appear as Bruce Wayne at the end, outside the courthouse alongside Supergirl, thanks to some set photos that were released a few years back. On the flip side, there was another alternate ending featuring Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman and Henry Cavill as Superman popping up at the end. Then there's the third ending, which is the one we actually got, where George Clooney appears as Bruce Wayne as a sort of a joke.
Who the fuck is this?
To this day, I still question why WB had so much confidence in this movie leading up to its theatrical release. They were making moves they hadn't done for any other DCEU movie. They showed the entire film almost 2 months early at CinemaCon, with the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery going on record stating it's the best superhero movie I've ever seen, and that he'd gone on to watch it 3 times.
So you're a liar.
The Flash had this weird amount of glaze from random celebrities prior to the film's release. Why is Jaden Smith saying the movie changed his life on Twitter? Mind you, these aren't meme edits. Every quote I'm showing or I'm about to show is real. Tom Cruise, for some reason, was praising the movie and loved it so much he called the director for 15 minutes just to rave about it.
Excuse me, the fuck did you just say?
Brother, the renowned author Stephen King was complimenting the movie on Twitter as well. I don't know why WB was just giving random celebrities early access screenings to The Flash. I know them checks must have been hidden like crazy. They went as far as releasing a whole new trailer for the Super Bowl, which was Warner Brothers' first time at the Super Bowl in 17 years. The marketing for this movie was also a bit weird, with the giant elephant in the room, that being the main star, Ezra Miller being way too problematic. Sasha Calle alone was single-handedly carrying the press tours and interviews when the movie was coming out. I don't even think Ezra Miller made a public appearance in anything relating to promoting the movie up until the red carpet premiere in Los Angeles. Imagine putting in all that effort to promote a movie only for it to not only become the biggest flop in the DCEU and the largest flop among DC movies, worse than Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern, but also the biggest flop of any superhero movie. Yeah, those box office numbers were rough. While it's not the lowest grossing movie in the DCEU, it's pretty bad when taking into account the movie's $200+ million budget and how it only made $271 million worldwide, which is nasty work. This was honestly the biggest box office bomb out of any superhero film up until the Marvels released later that same year. There are several reasons as to why the Flash movie underperformed this badly. Firstly, James Gunn announcing the first 10 projects in his reboot plans before any of the DCEU films slated for 2023 released probably wasn't the best idea if they wanted those movies to be even remotely successful. I'd imagine many people wouldn't see the value in watching those movies or or thinking they didn't matter. In my personal opinion, even if James Gunn had waited until all 4 DCEU films in 2023 had released theatrically, all of them would have probably still underperformed at the box office to some extent, because at that point in time, the DC brand was in the trenches and the general audience had already checked out. Keep in mind, not a single movie in the DCEU since Aquaman had come close to 500 million globally. Not Black Adam, not Birds of Prey, not the first Shazam movie, nothing. The only DC movies that accomplished this were the non-DCEU films like Joker and The Batman. The interest of the general audience is crucial to a movie's success. If Yanti ain't interested in The Flash, then it's over, buddy. It's a movie recalling previous DC movies that most people weren't fond of. Any amount of hype The Flash could have gained died years ago, after years of studio meddling and all types of shenanigans behind the scenes. There's also the fact that the movie's starring an actual criminal, and the film's reception was pretty mixed, to put it mildly. I think people were kind of bored of seeing any potential generic superhero flex, and I guess The Flash just looked like another part of the mediocrity pile. Also, the movie doesn't look pretty, like, at all. It has some of the worst CGI and visual effects I've seen in a comic book movie. Good lord.
Ah! Good God! It's hideous. But beautiful in an ugly way. But mostly hideous. Ugh.
I think any future cinematic universes, including the upcoming DCU helmed by James Gunn, need to take a strong look at the DCEU's history to learn what not to do. The entire universe's demise can be pinned down to incompetent leadership, lack of stability, and confidence on what to do with these characters. The DCU unfortunately has to do a lot of heavy lifting to demonstrate to casual audiences what they've been missing out on with the DC catalog. So far, the only movies that have been hitting are the Batman related ones with Todd Phillips' Joker and the Batman movie. If this new universe doesn't bang, don't be surprised if we only get more of those Elseworlds movies. The failures of Black Adam and The Flash were the biggest indicators that this franchise needed a reset. I know some fans still wanted it to be salvaged just with new leadership and direction, but with how it's been messy since its inception, taking the reboot route was the best option. Here's to hoping that the new Superman movie is going to be a banger.